It was just after midnight on March 8, 2014, when a routine red-eye flight lifted off from Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia, bound for Beijing. The weather was calm. The pilots were experienced. 239 people on board settled into their seats, some drifting off to sleep, some texting family, "See you soon." Then at exactly 1:19 a.m., air traffic control heard the captain's final words. "Good night, Malaysian 370. 37 seconds later, flight MH370 disappeared from radar. No distress signal. No mayday. No explosion on screens. Just gone. And from that moment, the world entered one of the deepest, most unsettling mysteries of modern history. A commercial airliner carrying mothers, fathers, children, scientists, artists simply vanished. And nearly a decade later, we still don't know why. Tonight, on The Hidden Side, we dive into the human heartbreak, the twisted theories, the overlooked clues, and the chilling reality that in our age of satellites and surveillance, an entire Boeing 777 can still disappear without a trace. At 12:41 a.m. local time, Flight MH370 took off as scheduled. On the flight deck, Captain Zahari Ahmad Shah, 53 years old, more than 18,000 flight hours, and First Officer Farik Abdul Hamid, 27, still new but qualified. The flight path was standard, northeast over the South China Sea, then turning north toward Vietnam and eventually China. For 38 minutes, everything seemed normal. The plane climbed to cruising altitude, 35,000 feet. Passengers settled in. Crew served drinks. The captain even chatted briefly with air traffic control. Then came that last radio transmission. Calm routine. Moments later, as MH370 left Malaysian airspace and entered Vietnamese control, it vanished. On radar screens, the transponder signal disappeared. But military radar kept tracking the plane, and what it saw was chilling. MH370 didn't crash immediately. Instead, it made a sharp left turn, flew back across the Malay Peninsula, then turned again, flying southwest over the Indian Ocean, in the complete opposite direction of Beijing. When air traffic control realized they'd lost the plane, confusion reigned. Was it a transponder malfunction? A hijacking? An accident? Relatives waiting at Beijing airport saw the arrival board quietly switch from on time to delayed, then finally to canceled. They crowded the arrival hall, desperate for news, glued to their phones. But the truth was, even the authorities didn't know where MH370 was. In those first few hours, critical time was lost. Precious hours when search and rescue might have made a difference, but bureaucratic confusion delayed the alarm. By dawn, the world's largest multinational search operation in aviation history began. Ships, helicopters, satellites, scanning thousands of square miles of ocean. But MH370 had left almost no trace. The South China Sea, the Malay Peninsula, the Strait of Malacca, all were searched. And as hours turned to days, then weeks, the questions deepened. Why did the plane turn around? Who was flying it? And why didn't anyone on board send a message? As days stretched into weeks, the world's attention locked on the biggest question. How can a modern Boeing 777 vanish without leaving a single emergency call or debris field? Journalists camped outside the airline's headquarters. Families pleaded for answers, clinging to hope that maybe, somehow, the plane had landed safely somewhere remote. But evidence began to tell a darker story. Satellite data revealed something chilling. MH370 kept flying for hours after it dropped off radar. At 8:11 a.m., nearly 7 hours after its last radio contact, an automated handshake ping between the aircraft and a satellite suggested the plane was still airborne. But there was no sign of life from inside. For the families, every new piece of data brought both hope and heartbreak. If the plane kept flying, maybe the passengers were alive. But experts warned, without oxygen, anyone on board would have fallen unconscious long before the final ping. And that raised the most haunting question yet. Who was flying the plane? Suspicion turned to the cockpit. Captain Zahari Ahmad Shah, a veteran pilot, married, father. But investigators discovered something troubling. A homemade flight simulator found at his home. On it, Zahari had plotted a route eerily similar to MH370's final suspected path into the southern Indian Ocean. The media seized on the idea. Was this a carefully planned suicide? Some investigators said yes, citing the simulator and his private struggles. Others close to him insisted he'd never do it, describing Zahari as cheerful, professional, devoted to his family. And there was still no proof that he was at the controls in those final hours. If not him, then who? A hijacker? The young first officer? A sudden catastrophic system failure? Each theory seemed to open more questions than answers. And while experts argued, the Indian Ocean became the center of the largest, deepest, and most expensive search in aviation history. The southern Indian Ocean is one of the most remote, hostile places on Earth. Waves taller than buildings. Currents that scatter debris across thousands of miles. 4 months, search ships and aircraft scoured the ocean floor, scanning over 120,000 square kilometers. They found nothing. No fuselage. No black boxes. No bodies. Hope rose briefly in July 2015, more than a year after the disappearance, when a single piece of wreckage washed up on Réunion Island near Madagascar. A barnacle-covered wing flap, later confirmed as part of MH370. It proved one thing: the plane had ended its flight in the ocean. But the ocean is vast and the currents unforgiving. More small fragments were discovered on African beaches and Indian Ocean islands, but never the main wreckage. The passengers' seats, suitcases, and most heartbreakingly, the remains of the 239 people on board were never found. Each discovery brought brief hope to families, followed by crushing disappointment. Without the black boxes, the world might never know what really happened in those final moments. And so, the question echoed louder: how could this happen? Could a single pilot plan such an act in vanish in modern airspace? Was there a catastrophic failure? Or was something darker at play, a hijacking or cover-up? As months turned to years, theories multiplied, some grounded in data, others spiraling into conspiracy. Some experts believe the plane suffered a sudden fire or electrical failure, knocking out communications and sending it off course. Others point to Zahari's simulator path and say it was a deliberate act. Some suggest hijackers seized control, possibly passengers from the manifest, though no group has ever credibly claimed responsibility. And then there are the wilder theories. That MH370 was shot down accidentally by a military force and covered up. That it was flown to a secret base. That it carried sensitive cargo, and someone didn't want it to arrive. Each theory has holes. But the evidence we do have paints a deeply unsettling picture. After the last radio contact, someone turned the plane around. Someone flew it south into the emptiest part of the ocean. And then silence for hours. No demands. No mayday. No goodbye. In an age where satellites see every street, where cell phones track every move, MH370 seemed to slip into a blind spot the size of a continent. Was it chance or design? For the families left behind, the years became a blur of hope and heartbreak. Some still keep the same phone numbers active just in case loved ones call. Others meet every March at memorials, releasing lanterns into the night sky, writing letters to the missing. The not knowing is the cruelest part. Without remains, some cling to hope. Others just want answers no matter how painful. In 2017, after spending over $150 million, the official search was suspended until credible new evidence emerges. A private company, Ocean Infinity, searched again in 2018, still nothing. Since then, MH370 remains where it ended, lost, somewhere under thousands of meters of cold black water. And the people it carried remain frozen in time, neither truly gone nor truly found. Despite years of investigation, a handful of small clues remain unexplained, and they keep the mystery alive. Among them, the deliberate disabling of the transponder. At exactly 1:21 a.m., MH370's transponder, the device that broadcasts its identity and altitude to civilian radar, stopped transmitting. It wasn't smashed. It wasn't ripped out. Someone flipped a switch. And just seconds later, the plane turned west, off its scheduled path. Investigators call it a deliberate act. But who did it? And why? Some point to the captain, alone in the cockpit while the first officer stepped out. Others ask whether a struggle happened, but if so, why was there no call, no alert? Could passengers have noticed the change in course? We may never know, because the cockpit voice recorder remains on the ocean floor, silent. The most haunting clue came from an unexpected source, a British satellite company called Inmarsat. Though MH370's main systems were silent, its satellite antenna kept sending automatic hourly handshakes to a satellite overhead. These pings weren't meant for tracking, but engineers realized they could use them by measuring the frequency shift caused by the plane's motion, called the Doppler effect, to estimate where MH370 flew. The data showed the plane flew south over the Indian Ocean, on autopilot or under control, until the final ping at 8:11 a.m. Then, silence. Most experts believe the plane ran out of fuel and crashed into the sea. But even that is just a best guess. The question that still divides investigators: was this a carefully planned pilot suicide? Some argue yes. The deliberate course change. The transponder shut down. The flight simulator path to the Southern Ocean. Together, they form a chilling picture of a pilot wanting to disappear without a trace. But Zahari's friends and family reject this completely. They describe him as dedicated, cheerful, with no sign of crisis. No suicide note. No evidence of extremist views. And above all, no reason to kill 238 innocent people. And so, suspicion turned to other possibilities. Could someone have broken into the cockpit? After September 11th, cockpit doors were reinforced, but there are procedures to unlock them from inside. Still, no evidence points to hijackers. No ransom, no group claiming responsibility. Over the years, theories have ranged from the logical to the bizarre. Some say MH370 caught fire, crew and passengers were overcome by smoke, and the plane flew on autopilot until fuel ran out. But why the deliberate course change? Others suggest decompression, a slow cabin leak knocking everyone unconscious, leaving the autopilot in command. Again, why switch off the transponder? The more extreme theories: is shot down by a military missile by mistake, then covered up. Flown to a remote airfield in Asia or the Middle East. Targeted because of sensitive cargo or passengers on board. These theories lack evidence, but they thrive in the silence left by missing black boxes. In the information vacuum, rumor becomes reality, and speculation becomes fuel for endless documentaries and internet forums. What can't be denied? The search for MH370 was the most ambitious in aviation history. Ships dragged sonar scanners across mountain-sized ridges on the ocean floor, 2 miles deep. Crews battled 20-meter waves, frigid water, and the crushing pressure of the deep sea. They mapped more of the Indian Ocean floor than had ever been mapped before, just to look for this single aircraft. But the ocean is vast and the target heartbreakingly small. A fuselage the size of a train car, scattered into fragments by the force of impact, drifting with the current. The search cost over $150 million. When it ended in 2017, the official line was simple: The aircraft is not located in the defined search area. But for families, that sentence felt like a door closing forever. In hotel ballrooms turned briefing centers, families gathered for years. They wrote letters to missing loved ones, lit candles, and watched news updates that never seemed to bring news. Many still keep birthdays, still set a place at the table, still wait for answers that never come. For them, closure isn't just about remains. It's about knowing what really happened in the sky that night, and why. What makes MH370 so haunting isn't just the loss. It's the silence. The fact that in an age of instant communication, a jetliner can fly for 7 hours without anyone seeing where it went. It exposes a blind spot in modern surveillance, a patch of ocean where technology falls silent. And it reminds us, for all our science and satellites, the world is still vast, still wild, and sometimes still unknowable. The plane's final resting place may never be found. But the mystery will remain, not because we love unsolved stories, but because the real story is 239 lives that ended in the dark, and the loved ones left behind in the light. In total, only a handful of MH370's remains have ever been recovered. Small pieces, a flaperon, 2 wing fragments, cabin paneling, pieces of interior trim. Each fragment tells a story in silence. Barnacles showing it floated for months, saltwater scarring, jagged edges hinting at high-speed impact. But without the main wreckage, without the black boxes, these scraps remain frustrating whispers. They confirm the plane ended in the southern Indian Ocean. But not why, not how, and not what happened in those final moments. The world learned an uncomfortable truth from MH370. Commercial planes aren't tracked in real time over oceans. Radar only covers land and coastal zones. Over open sea, planes rely on position reports and satellite pings, often every 30 to 60 minutes. If those stop, the plane effectively vanishes until it reaches radar again, or doesn't. After MH370, airlines began adding better satellite tracking, new safety standards, and shorter ping intervals. But even now, over the world's emptiest waters, blind spots remain. MH370's disappearance exposed those blind spots, and forced the industry to admit how easily a plane could still slip through. In the first frantic days, families reported unanswered calls ringing on passengers' cell phones. Rumors spread. Maybe the plane landed somewhere. Maybe they were alive, held hostage. Experts explained it away. Sometimes a call can appear to ring while the network searches, even when the phone is destroyed or out of range. But for the families, hearing that ringtone, even once, felt like a heartbeat in the darkness. One of the darkest theories still haunts investigators, that someone, likely in the cockpit, planned MH370's disappearance. Consider the steps. Switching off the transponder at exactly the handover point between controllers. Changing course with precise manual turns. Avoiding military radar coverage long enough to reach the empty ocean. If true, it points to chilling premeditation. Someone who didn't just want to die, but wanted the plane to vanish completely. But no note, no claim, and no evidence of motive has ever surfaced. A perfect crime, or an improbable tragedy? Others argue MH370 suffered a sudden mechanical disaster. A fire, decompression, or electrical failure that knocked out communication systems. The plane could have flown on autopilot until fuel exhaustion, before spiraling into the sea. But this doesn't explain the deliberate turns back over Malaysia, or why someone switched off the transponder, a step outside normal emergency protocol. Every theory answers some questions, and leaves others gaping open. And that's why MH370 remains unsolved. Too many pieces don't quite fit together. The official search alone cost over $150 million. But the real cost is incalculable. 239 lives lost. thousands of family members living in limbo, aviation shaken to its core. For pilots and crews worldwide, MH370 is a whispered fear, the flight that vanishes without a call, a trace, or a goodbye. Many next of kin refuse to accept silence as an answer. They formed groups, filed lawsuits, lobbied governments, and funded private searches. They say, it's not just about MH370, it's about stopping it from ever happening again. Some carry anger, others carry hope, but all share the same need to know what really happened that night. Even as years pass, MH370 still captivates us. It feels impossible. A modern jet, hundreds of passengers, vanished in a world of GPS, cameras, and live streaming. It frightens us because it shows the limits of what we know and the frailty of the systems we trust. And it haunts us because it could happen again. Behind every conspiracy and documentary, there are 239 real people. And maybe that's what keeps the story alive. A mystery that isn't just about what we lost, but about who. Somewhere 2 miles beneath cold black water, MH370's wreckage lies undisturbed. In that silence are answers. What happened, who was at the controls, and why they flew into oblivion. One day technology or chance may find it. Until then, we're left with fragments of metal, of memory, of theory. And we remember this. In the modern age, even the greatest mysteries are not about machines or data. They're about people, the families still waiting for a knock at the door, the passengers whose stories ended midair, and a world still asking, how could this happen? This was the story of MH370, the vanished plane, the world's greatest aviation mystery. You've been watching The Hidden Side. If you want more real stories, crime stories, dark mysteries, and history's hidden corners, subscribe, share, and let us keep exploring what lies beneath the surface.